you have to vent it for 10 minutes. If you're not venting these for 10 minutes, then you have a whole bunch of air that you've left in this pot, in both of them. So when you vent this for 10 minutes, so the air's going to come out here and here, and it's going to be shooting out, okay? So that's where I think sometimes people get afraid, because it's hot. You're heating it up, and there's hot steam coming out of these valves. But what you're doing is pulling that extra air out so that the pressure can build up and that you can properly can then whatever it is that you're putting into your jars for the pressure canners. So that part is critical, and a lot of people leave that step out. So 10 minutes you're venting that to let that extra air out of the canners. Then, and you said time, that's exactly right. So from then, you're putting your weight on. If you're using the dial gauge, you're adjusting your stovetop, because everyone in here stovetop is going to heat differently. So maybe I can leave mine on medium and it heats up properly, but yours may have to be on low, medium low, or yours might have to be on medium high. That's where it takes that extra effort to really note each time that you can, and you'll get a little more accurate each time as to what that stove has to be on, okay? So what you're doing with this one, remember, is the jiggling, right? What you're doing with the dial gauge is you're going to turn your stove on a higher heat. You're going to quickly raise this to about 8 pounds of pressure. Then you're going to turn it down a little bit, because you're heating it up and you're heating it up and you're heating it up, so it's going to keep on going. You want to raise it quickly to 8 pounds and then turn it down and then slowly go the extra 3 pounds, okay, to 11. Then you're going to have to watch it just a little bit, and maybe, like I said, mess with your dial on your stovetop to see where it needs to be to continually have that 11 pounds on here.
The jiggle will stop.
The jiggles will stop. Yes, they will stop on here. And if you see that, so let's talk about the fair coming up in your jars if you're going to enter canning at the fair. When this stops and there's silence, or this pressure drops because there's not enough heat, it's going to fluctuate the liquid levels in your jars. So if you've ever got a jar out and the liquid's down like 3 or 4 inches, it's because a couple things, but one is that the correct temperature did not stay at a constant temperature throughout the whole processing time, and that caused that liquid to go up and down and up and down. It goes out of the jar and it goes back in, what it can anyway. So if you've ever seen that, it's because of the temperature on the canning that you will see. Okay, the last thing I want to show you, then we'll get into some of the tested recipes, is this is my brand new steam canner. They have just came out and approved this for canning. Not for pressure canning though, so not for the green beans, some of the tomato products, corn, soup mixtures, not for those types of things. But the other veggies, any pickled vegetables, the chutneys, the jams, the jellies, the fruits. This is very light, and after we're done, you're welcome to come up here and see this. And this would take the place of this one, okay? So instead of filling all that hot water and boiling all that water and covering your jars, you put about 2 inches of water into this. It holds 7 quarts, 8 pints. You put the lid on, you've got it on the stove, and you've got a little dial at the top that tells you where to keep the temperature, and you process it for the same amount of time you would in this water bath. So they just approved these. Steam canners were not approved until this year, so they just approved them. And when I say they, there is a National Food Preservation site that the University of Georgia Extension works with. They are kind of the gurus for food preservation, and they do all these studies, and they do testing time and time and time again to see whether indeed this is safe. So they have finally got enough research saying yes, we can use these. So I'm really excited, because guess what I have at my house? I've got a smooth cooktop, right? Which most people have nowadays. So it's up to your manufacturer of your cooktop on whether you can can on it or not. You have to refer to them and even give them a call. There's not an easy answer when people say, can I can on my smooth cooktop? I don't know. That's up to you, because I want you to keep a couple things in mind when you think about that. You're on your smooth cooktop, it's ceramic, cooktops, you've got heat coming up and you've got pressure of the jars and the weight going down. And that's what causes sometimes the cracking and the scratching on those smooth cooktops. So I can't tell you yes or no either way, but what I can tell you is this is heavy, but it only has a little bit of water in your jars in it. This is heavy because it's got a whole lot of water. So now we have a new alternative to this. Is aluminum and it's very light and you don't have that much pressure if you're water bathing on your cooktop if you want to use this type of canner. So it's about the same price as you would pay for a pressure canner as well. And I brought the book today just because it's so new if you wanted to look at that. Now, after you decide what type of canner that you're going to process your food in, the next thing is you really need everything to go with your canning, right? So what are those options? And you could probably make do in your kitchen, but for safety, these really are a necessity. So I brought my favorites with me. So your jar gripper, right? Does anybody try to get those jars out without one of these? I can tell you, I went to my mama's and I said, where is your jar gripper? I don't know, I can't find it. I thought, well, I'd like to have known that. So I had to try to rig up some like chicken tongs and try to grab those jars out of that boiling water and now the pressure canner, which is not safe, but I had to get the jars out. But the jar gripper is a necessity. If you do not have one of these, highly recommend them. They're pretty cheap, they're reasonable, you can get them at a lot of different places, and it's really a must for canning. Next thing, of course, is a simple funnel. You can get that anywhere. And the reason you want to use that is to keep the mess off your jar, right? And I didn't bring my jars today, but you all know what the jars look like. And by using a funnel, all the ingredients go straight into the jar, not on the side if you're just ladling in without that funnel, right? Because you've got to clean all that off if you're going to have a proper seal. My lid grabber, right? Who has a little magnet lid grabber? Anybody? If you don't, I'm telling you, this is well worth the money too, okay? This is for your lids that you've got in your little sauce pot. This is a little magnet on the end. You stick that baby in there and it just gets that lid so nice and pretty, and it can set it right on top of your jars. It is a necessity. You know, for years I can remember my grandmother using a fork, you know, and flipping the lids out and wiping it off, and I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it was fine. Listen, I'm still standing here, so I ate her stuff, so, you know, nothing happened to me. And she would probably die, I know, if I was talking about her, but anyway. They know I use them in my classes anyhow. But seriously, you know, when she used those forks, if it would have hit some of the sealing compound on those jar lids, it could have allowed air into those jars, and that could be why some of them popped open. I mean, on a serious note, okay? So that's why you have to be so careful with what you're using when you can. Now, the last thing I have doesn't look like anything special. You could use this or you can use a spatula, but do not use a butter knife to get the air bubbles out. You want to use something plastic that is heat resistant. Okay, so this goes in, you pull it to the side to let your air bubbles out. You can use a spatula, soft-handled utensil that you have in the kitchen. But I've seen a butter knife used umpteen times, I'll just tell you, okay? The reason you don't use the butter knife is your jar is hot, your product is hot, you're putting the metal knife down in there and it's clanging against that jar. It could cause a hairline crack and you might not ever see it until you've already put it in your pressure canner or in your water bath and now the jar has broken, and that could be one of the reasons why. So just please don't use a butter knife. Use some type of plastic utensil. It does not have to be this one, but this one has the beveled edge here, and that is headspace count. So if you want to do a 1/2 inch, an inch, or a 1/4 headspace on your jars, you put that on the lip of the jar and you measure down. So you want to get the air out of the jars. Anything like your green beans, tomatoes, salsas, peas, corn, if you're processing it, you put it down the side of the jar and you pull it to the center, and that lets any excess air that's trapped in the food before you put it in the canner. Correct, yes. So I've actually bought several of these little kits that they have because I like them so well, and it was so reasonably priced, and so that's why they all match, and they're green because I have several of them. I have about 3 or 4 because I lose them. I lose stuff out of it. But I'm going to leave these up here for you to look at them, but seriously, for the price, these tools are very well worth using that investment to get into canning. Okay, so tested recipes. There's a couple of books and handouts that UT uses for tested recipes. Some of you may have this already. This is called So Easy to Preserve. It is put out by the University of Georgia. Like I mentioned to you, they are kind of the gurus for home food preservation. But this is, well, you can see I have stuff. I have about 3 or 4 of these too because I love this canning book. If you like to can, or if you just like to read about canning, everything you could possibly want to know, from vegetables to fruits to preserves to specialty items. You know, if you all know Extension, you know, home economics, FCS, whatever. My family expects quite a bit out of me at the holidays, you know. And so I'm like, you know, I don't have time to do all this stuff for you. And so I started making jams and jellies or preserves or whatever to put at their little place setting at the table. And so this little book helped me come up with one idea one year. And it is just really filled with a lot of good recipes if you like to try different things. So mine was a kiwi pineapple preserve. And so it was really pretty and green, and I put a little red ribbon on it, and they just thought that was great, you know. And it was easy for me. I could do a whole batch without having to go make something for their place setting. But I tell you that story to tell you this book has everything in it. And I think it's about $36 right now. But I do think it is a great resource. If you forget something with your canning, whether it's water bath or whether it's the pressure canning, you go right to it. It takes you step by step by step through it. It takes you through the time. It takes you through how to adjust time. Like if some of you maybe don't live here and you're at a higher elevation somewhere, how to adjust your time if you're over that 1,000 feet. Because over a certain elevation, water boils at a different temperature, at a lower temperature. So you need to adjust for that, and it takes you through walking you step by step through that. So this is one of the tested recipes, okay, that I think you would really like looking through. Another one is, of course, our UT publication, and your extension office here will be able to help you with this. You can access this online. It is not as lengthy as you can tell, but it's got some of the same information. It just does not have the recipes. So it really depends what you're looking for. If you're talking about processes, learning the process, this will help you. If you want recipes, this is what you're looking for, because this has hundreds and hundreds of recipes in it. Now, another tested recipe that you are allowed to use is the Blue Book. So I know several of you have probably seen these over the years. These are also tested recipes. So feel rest assured, if you have the Blue Book canning, then you can use the recipes in this book as well for canning at home. So I just wanted to show you there's other sources out there, but what is not a source is going online and Googling it and going to delish.com and it popping up a recipe. I would caution you in doing that. I'm not going to tell you they're all wrong, but when you're talking about food preservation and canning, I think you have to be so careful because they've not tested the recipe. They probably made it and canned it and it tasted great. But how do you know? How do you know? That's just the only question I want you to keep in your mind. So when I talk about tested recipes, that's why people probably get tired of me saying that in Cookeville or in Putnam County. I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, and they'll be like, well, don't you think this would be okay? No, I don't know. So that's why I'm going to give you this recipe. You know, some of them use the recipes I give them and some people don't. I'll just tell you. I'm sure they use their other ones and that's fine, but that's their choice.
How often do they update it? Because, you know, there's a recipe. Do they get more recipes or these are recipes for the last 1,000 years? You know,
recently, what I have seen, they have updated quite a bit. Because if you will watch the news, food safety always seems to be in the news. And so they will update recipes, particularly if they have found something to be wrong, or if they have found some new, like, epiphany, like, oh, wait, we should have put that in. So, like, for example, soup mixture. I just went to a canning seminar again just to kind of update myself, and see if there was anything new out there. They have changed the processing for soup mixture. So does anybody like to make soup mixture in here? Okay, so the deal now, well, do you remember what the canning was before by chance? Do you remember what they told you to do?
I use the bulk can
Okay.
mostly.
Okay.
And I just put everything in there.
Yeah. So before, we all like different things in our soup mixture, and what you used to do is you would put all your stuff in, and then you would go to your book and see, okay, what is the longest canning time for everything that I put in that? Corn, peas, llamas, whatever it was. And that's what you processed it as. But now, they have changed that to where you put half solids and half liquids into your jar, and then you process it. And this came from Georgia's. Now, this wasn't Ball or Blue book changing. This came from Georgia Extension because they have came up with a new testing procedure and found that in order for it to be safe, it needs to be half liquid and half solids. When I say solids, that means potatoes, carrots, or whatever you're putting in your soup mixture. And so things are ever changing. I don't think that they change 20 or 30 recipes all the time, but if it's been a few years since you've bought one, it might be a good idea to go out to the store.
Do they add new recipes?
Oh, yes, sometimes they add new recipes too, but now I can't really speak to all of them. I was trying to think when I bought this one.
That one's been out a few years.
This one, I think, gosh, I don't see the date on it. Maybe I probably had it 7 or 8 years probably, I'm thinking for this. So it's probably time for me to buy a new one of these just to compare. I like to have them anyway just to look at. But yes, if you're looking for newer recipes added though, I would stick with this one. They add things as they come up with them. So that's just something that I prefer better anyway, just because of the amount of recipes, okay? So anyway, I do like canning. I know I'm a little like on both sides of it. You want to have fun, you want to make something that tastes good, but you got to be safe.